What if this technology could allow you to see into the future or even revisit history? Today, we'll discuss a top-secret project said to have come from reverse-engineered ET technology. Its purpose? To enhance a person's mental and psychic abilities, allowing them to see into the future or even the past. But when and how and where did this technology come from? And if it is real, then who's been using it? And for what purpose? Don't miss Project Looking Glass on edgeofwonder.tv today.
Welcome to Edge of Wonder. We're your hosts. I'm Ben.
And I'm Rob. So Ben, if you turn back time to see anything in history, where would you go? And if you say anything about Cher right now, I'm going to be very upset.
If I could turn back time.
Oh man, Cher aside, okay, this is my favorite topic of all time, time travel. This is so hard because, I mean, really, there's so many things I would like to see, like the birth and death of Jesus, meeting Plato, the 1561 UFO battle over Nuremberg.
I'm into that.
Yeah, Atlantis. I mean, there's so many things here.
But I mean, Plato, I would go straight back to see Socrates, man. And next, I think I would go back to see how Colonel Sanders came up with his famous chicken recipe for KFC so I can make chicken every day. Or better yet, I try to trace back the mullet to its first haircut. Everyone thinks it was in the 80s, but I have a feeling the Spartans rocked those.
Oh man, why does that not surprise me? That's something you would do. But hey, you know, if you did the KFC thing, you'd be like a gazillionaire.
You mean if I had the recipe? Dude, fried chicken is my currency. I'm already rich. I don't need a recipe for that.
Alright, well, did you guys know that the very first episode Rob and I filmed together was time travel? Even though our first one, technically, that was published was the mermaid one. But
which, by the way, was really disappointing. I'm still disappointed in that episode.
Yeah, I mean, that was the first video that second video that we ever made together. But I think really we should just reshoot that time.
Yeah, a little bit embarrassing at this point, aren't they?
Seriously.
Also, we need to update that Portals to Hell video, man. Like, the audio on that is just so killer. Ugh, the content was so interesting, but that audio. Anyway, we do go into a lot of awesome stuff soon in the Old World Order series, so make sure you guys check that out on our edgeofwonder.tv platform. It is going to blow your minds. We have never made anything of this caliber before.
Yeah, it has been a long process, but a good one. We couldn't be more proud of what our entire team accomplished. Almost like being the father of Baby Yoda. You know, it's like our Baby Yoda.
You had to throw Baby Yoda in there, didn't you? But honestly, you guys, this is the best thing we've ever produced, and it's only going to get better. But let's get into what Project Looking Glass is and the purpose of it. Also, is it possible to know the future events before they happen? I mean, everybody's asking this, right?
Yeah, or see past events as they happened. Well, according to certain intelligent drops by the number 17...
I see what you did there.
It is possible that the Alliance may be using it to spy on the evil Empire. Can you believe that?
Okay, so what is Project Looking Glass? The first person who mentioned this secret project was Bob Lazar, who is claimed to have worked at the S-Force facility near Area 51, and this was reportedly where it was being used.
So, what is Project Looking Glass? Well, before we answer this, we have to warn you that this gets crazy pretty quickly. But hey, we all know you guys like it when we get crazy, so here we go.
Project Looking Glass was a top secret project from reversed engineered extraterrestrial technology used by the military-industrial complex, the US Navy, government contract agencies, and various black projects through the 70s and 80s. And now you can basically shut this video off because we just told you everything. I'm just kidding.
Well, not quite. But when using this technology, it would enhance a person's mental and psychic abilities, allowing them to peer into the future or even the past. Similar how Professor X from the X-Men uses Cerebro, which some say this is where the idea of it came from.
I was just gonna say that. It sounds like Professor X. I mean, many insiders say the secret military found this tech when they first began investigating the Roswell incident. They noticed that the craft didn't have any controls or ways to pilot or steer the UFO. Instead, what they found were only these special chairs.
Soon they began to understand that whoever sat in these chairs would just need to meditate and focus on the point in time they would want to go to, either from the past or the future, or even a location. Then a portal would just open up and the craft would fly right through it and instantly be in that new time, space, or location.
So when you would put someone who already has psychic abilities in the chair, it would enhance their abilities even more. Also, incredible things would happen, such as they were able to look at different time spaces through this tech. Our good friend Justin Deschamps has a great article on his Stillness in the Storm website where he really goes in depth with this technology, and he also happens to deserve a Beard of the Year award.
I would definitely agree to that one too. What is known publicly is that the military experimented on children based on this tech that they retrieved from Roswell and the Montauk Project. They were also working with the Sirius star system and Orion, which plays a huge part in all of this.
But we'll have to save that for a future episode. But getting back to this, in the 90s, President Bill Clinton even publicly apologized for the experiments they were doing on children in the 70s in Montauk, New York.
Too bad he didn't apologize for all this satanic child.
Ben, we aren't talking about time travel right now on this episode. Let's stay away from the censors. We can get crazy later on edgewonder.tv for that crap.
Okay. Yeah, so the Montauk Project was the name of a project which was an offshoot of MK Ultra in the 70s.
There's also the yellow cube, but we'll get more into that a bit later.
But essentially, how everyone describes the device is a large bowl with concentric rings that spin around it using water as the conductor.
The movie Contact displayed this very well. Also, Total Recall had Arnold in the chair, which is how he got to Mars.
By the way, I was always confused as a kid on how he actually got to Mars, so now that makes sense after realizing all of this.
According to David Wilcock, he said that the device works much like the pineal gland in the human body.
It has the ability to create a highly coherent energy vortex or torsion field under certain conditions, allowing an individual to receive information by non-physical means.
What this means for those of you out there who don't know what a torsion field is, like me, it is a twisting and whirling of energy, similar to the machine in the movie Contact, which we mentioned before, which was basically Silence of the Lambs without Hannibal Lecter.
No, Rob, not really. It wasn't.
But it should have been.
It used to be one of my favorite movies back
No.
long time ago. Anyway, David is essentially describing the ability to remote view or precognition and retrocognition. This is where an individual can clearly see objects or locations in his mind very accurately and even see future events or past events.
To really get into the nuts and bolts of this, we wanted to introduce Bill Wood, who was the Special SEAL Team Unit in Iraq. He was interviewed on the Project Camelot channel with Carrie Cassidy.
What is interesting, during the first part of the interview, they actually wanted to be in a public space, but soon you can hear helicopters flying around outside, which never stops. So they then moved to a private setting.
Now, the main purpose of this interview was to talk about who he called the Oathkeepers. These were people who focus on keeping what is in the best interests of the Constitution and the American people.
Bill was really there to expose the National Defense Authorization Act, as he believed this was the end of our constitutional rights. He explained that this act considered America a war zone and American citizens are now subjected to arrest and detainment outside of the constitutional protections of trial by jury, the right to an attorney, and many other rights which are stripped away in this bill.
That's crazy, man.
Super, it really is.
The media never informed the public about what it truly is, and the way it is written makes the language sound as if it's protecting American citizens. But through complex wording, pages that go on forever, it basically describes that every citizen is a potential threat. And they make it extremely long so no one will actually read it and come to that conclusion.
Yeah. But get this, before his death, Senator John McCain was pushing an updated version of this bill to be passed in 2018. So Bill Wood was really there to expose this bill in which he was deeply worried about. But soon, the conversation takes a very interesting direction when he starts to talk about Area 51.
Bill raises a very important question to confirm his credibility. He says, why do you think Area 51 is so secret? Here's what Bill says in his own words about Area 51.
The U.S. has dozens, if not hundreds, of vehicles that are more than capable of space flight and make it so we would have a fleet of vehicles that would be seemingly extraterrestrial. And the reason that that has to be kept that way is because if you know that those vehicles exist, you start to question the technology that they're based on. And when you start to do that, then you start to question why we're still using petroleum products and solid rocket boosters and everything else, and things get quickly out of hand after that. So to keep those vehicles a secret is to keep everything else a secret, which is why you would need that level of security to prevent anybody from finding out about it.
Aside from this, the YouTube channel Where We Go One, We Go All had a great breakdown of the S4 facility, which permanently has a white rabbit on the floor of 4-2. And Alice in Wonderland is a theme throughout the facility.
And for those Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fans out there, we all know how the book answers the question to what is the meaning of life, the universe, and everything else, which is the number 42. Makes you wonder if the authors were aware of this.
This then leads Bill to talk about Project Looking Glass and Project Stargate. He said the government was using this tech to see the future, but there was a problem when they tried to see past 2012, and eventually the project was completely decommissioned.
He said this is when the timelines began to converge at this point in 2012. He explained that at the end of 2012, the choices we make become less and less consequential to the outcome of the future, meaning that no matter what choices we make, the outcome ends up being the same.
Well, Bill, along with other insiders such as Dr. Dan Burisch, who we will be getting to, explained that whoever was using the looking glass would be able to see the choices they would make and see the future from those choices.
But a problem came up. They kept seeing the same outcomes, and that something big was on the horizon after 2012.
Overall, they saw 2 possible outcomes, but no matter what they tried to do to change it, in the end, there were only these 2 outcomes, which they called Timeline 1 and Timeline 2.
Timeline 1 is that there is a great spiritual awakening where the human race will go through a massive spiritual awakening and learn and see the truth of everything that has been hidden and kept from us for centuries. It is like we'll truly have our minds, spirits, and bodies become unlocked and enter a very peaceful world.
Timeline 2 is not as nice. It is where a great catastrophe will happen and destroy most of our world and the life on the planet. So the Deep State started to make preparations for these 2 timelines. So the interesting aspect of this is that with those 2 timelines, the Deep State wouldn't even acknowledge the first timeline, which was the Great Awakening. They would only talk about the second timeline, which was the catastrophe. Like, they just were not acknowledging it at all.
But the funny thing is they still refer to that one as the second timeline.
Right. Yeah, timeline 2.
Yeah.
So what was timeline 1, people?
Yeah.
I mean, really.
They needed to have control before these timelines started to converge. Now, here's where the rabbit hole gets even deeper. Bill said that Hillary Clinton used this and saw that she was supposed to become president after 2012.
Gotta laugh there a little bit.
Yeah.
Now, before we go on with her and what happened, which you all know, we need to bring up one more person, a lawyer by the name of Andrew Passagio.
Andrew's story is one of the most amazing testimonies that exists in the world of time travel. He was recruited at a young age by his father because children were better at adapting and accepting their new environment, meaning they didn't have any notions that blocked them from being in their new reality.
Andrew said when they used adults, eventually their minds would start to break down and develop mental illness and other health issues. So by using children, they would just observe the world around them without thinking too much about it.
To prove this, Andrew claims that he is the child in an 1863 photograph right after Abraham Lincoln gave his Gettysburg Address. He said that when he arrived, he didn't have any shoes and someone gave him some to wear, but they were way too big.
Then someone took this photo and years later he saw it. He also said that his father was there, but his father never went up to him because at the time in the past his father hadn't recruited him for the Project Pegasus yet. Which, this is getting all complicated, but then his father realized he would be recruiting him, and none of you understand that, and neither do we, but it makes sense.
Passagio's father worked at Edison Labs and claimed to have sent a penny back in time. Now, this is where the weird part comes in, as if this isn't weird enough.
Guess who stopped the lab from being shut down? None other than Hillary Clinton. Now, if this is true, then we start to understand why she was so confident in running in the 2016 election. She already saw she was going to win.
So we have Hillary seeing the future of her winning. I mean, they even rigged the voting booths, got Google to manipulate search results, had their own people in Congress, created a whole narrative for Russia, and had all the mainstream media on their side, and she still lost.
She was so confident that she was going to win that she even posted this image on her Twitter account. So she was probably more shocked than anyone else on the planet to find out that she not only lost, but she lost to none other than Donald Trump.
So, how did this happen? Another insider we now want to talk about is Dr. Dan Burisch.
Dr. Burisch is a microbiologist who received his PhD in 1989 in New York. However, NYU is already starting to deny any record of this, but documents exist showing his educational record. Both Bill and Dan said something that is really important, which is whatever you take with you is what you see.
To put this in perspective, it is like Luke asking Yoda what is in the cave in Empire Strikes Back, and Yoda responds, only what you take with you. So he takes his weapons and sees Vader and the dark side and all the possible actions from that.
Dude, so why don't you just, when all the confusing stuff, just use a Star Wars reference. It's gonna help everyone. I got it. All right. What this means is that Bill and Dan are saying that the person's intentions who are observing and reading the future has a huge part to play in how the future is interpreted. Dan said that human emotion brought instability to the outcomes for the potential timelines of number 1 and number 2, which makes sense because emotions always screw things up.
Exactly. And earlier we brought up the yellow cube. This device was similar to the looking glass, but a lot simpler. It allowed the user to see different possible futures based on the choices you would make. This was given to us by the Orions to President Eisenhower, which also shows the future. It wasn't very big and you could just basically hold on to it.
But say someone like Hillary wanted to see her future, but the person who's using that had good intentions, meaning they didn't want to have the timeline 2 scenario occur. So almost like it had a mind of its own, the yellow cube would show the person who is holding it a false outcome. Sometimes the user knew, and other times they might not have known. So basically what this is saying is that the yellow cube would change based on the person's own personal conditions and the mindset they were in while they were using it, which makes this kind of dicey.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Also, Bill mentioned that there is a divine power watching over everything. So no matter how much someone messes with the timeline, in the end, it will correct itself to have the outcome that it should have in the end.
The funny thing is that both Bill and Dan were both very optimistic that we're in timeline 1, and both of these interviews were conducted right after 2012. But this technology has been used since the early 50s by the leaders of the world to skew our timeline and for them to get the ideal best results, and you know, that's not always what's best for humanity.
Exactly. This is now where the Mandela effect starts to come about.
Oh, goody.
Yeah.
I knew that was gonna come in somewhere.
Talk about timelines, Mandela effect. Yeah, it's two of my favorite topics. Things are being changed in our timeline. We also have timelines converging on top of what CERN was doing before it was shut down. So there are changes in our timeline, but it seems that nothing can take place that would affect the final outcome.
So for example, we can't kill Hitler in the past, although I try every day in my dreams, since that might have a huge change in our timeline. But some people who we thought are still living might have died now in this timeline, and some people who we thought were dead are still living. So there's kinds of a lot of examples of this, including Nelson Mandela himself, and I mean we've seen some recently
so
too,
many
right?
of them. Yeah, and I mean, and I think in the end, these aren't affecting
the overall outcome.
Yes.
They're just like timelines almost converging.
Converging,
like,
yeah.
People's lives exist in multiple dimensions. Some can go on, some can die, and others, and you know.
Yeah. It's like we wake up, we fall asleep, wake up, and it's a new reality almost. So.
Right. But, you know, I'm still going to go back in time to kill Hitler.
We can try.
Ben.
That would be a great TV show, or like a movie.
You mean Kung Fury?
Oh, that's right, that's Kung Fury. I forgot about that. I was like, I thought there was something there. I have still yet to see
the greatest movie that's only a half hour of the last 10 years.
I gotta watch it now.
Yeah.
I still haven't seen it. Anyway, Dr. Michael Salla, along with other insiders, believe that the Cabal were trying to change the timeline to Nazi Germany actually winning the war. In fact, in an episode of Cosmic Disclosure with Corey Good and David Wilcock, Corey explains that how he saw a parallel reality where the Germans won the war and everything was very similar to how the show The Man in the High Castle was depicted.
Interesting. Now that show takes on a totally different life, doesn't it?
Sure does.
From our understanding, we believe that Q is military intelligence, and they are using this technology to look into the future and anticipate what the Deep Stank's next move is. Then use it against them to plan ahead and to neutralize any of their efforts.
However, we also have to take into account that the evil empire has this tech too and are using it in a similar fashion against the Alliance.
But the big difference is that the Alliance are using it for good to fight against evil. Also, just similar to what Bill Wood said, it is possible that some of the people who are on the Deep Stank side might have actual good intentions and don't want the Deep Stank to win. So it's possible there are fractured outcomes, basically, right?
Yeah, they're seeing fractured.
Right.
Meaning only seeing part of the future, whereas the good guys also have a power that the evil empire doesn't have, the divine creator or God behind them. There are many beings in the cosmos that don't want the evil to win, but really it depends on who is using this technology and for what purpose.
If Q's team really has this tech, which it seems now that they do, then it is possible that they've been using this since day one. There are too many examples to select from, but one of the big ones is a post from December 4th, 2017. It is a long post, but the relevant part Q posted is, wife connection, what is a pattern? Follow the wives. Keep watching the news this week. Future proves past.
Now, exactly 1 year to the dot on December 4th, 2018, George Bush's funeral took place and we all know what happened. All of the wives of the former presidents and high-level officials got envelopes, the contents of which have never been made public by Q.
But now, all of the references to Alice in Wonderland, Looking Glass, time, clocks, changing timelines, bring a whole new meaning to all of Q's posts.
Almost as if it's been staring us in the face the whole time. Some of us who are really into these so-called conspiracies, if you can really call them that, have been wondering about it. But now it seems we actually have confirmation.
Which now brings up a whole new level of questions, such as, is the Q team being aided by extraterrestrial beings, or interdimensional beings, or even divine beings? Imagine if this was true. It brings a whole new meaning to a whole lot of things.
And to add another twist to all of this, in which most of you might have already know, but according to Andrew Passagio, this technology was something that Nikola Tesla was working on.
What did Nikola Tesla not work on? Going deeper into this rabbit hole, John G. Trump, President Trump's uncle, comes into the picture because he was the one who was financing Tesla after JP Morgan backed off, since JP Morgan was a tool and Tesla wasn't interested in making money.
And this is where things get super weird. You might have heard us explain the book Baron Trump Adventures and The Last President, novels by Ingersoll Lockwood written in the late 1800s.
But get this, Fakepedia claims that these books were inspired by Alice in Wonderland. Right.
But that's not all. The Alice in Wonderland books were inspired by the real person named Alice Liddell, or it could be Little as in Liddell. This brings a whole new meaning to when Trump called Adam Schiff Little Adam.
Whoa, but that isn't all. On one of Q's first posts on October 29, 2017, Q actually says through the looking glass, and we all know Alice is a reference to Hillary Clinton. So could this mean that Q knows Hillary was using this technology? But wait, there's more.
Yeah, also what follows the White Rabbit? His pocket watch. Why does Q post so many images of the IWC watch? Is he telling us more than just showing us a proof here? Is he trying to say that they control or know the timeline? And if so, does that mean that they know the past or the future?
But get this, a pocket watch from 1944, which is a year after John G. Trump had access to Tesla's papers along with the FBI, is called the Ingersoll Trump pocket watch. And of course, Ingersoll just happens to be the author of the 1800s book. Seriously, you can't make this stuff up.
Yeah, so did someone now go back in time and write this book? That is the big question. It was pretty much unheard of until Trump became president. It also describes everything today, such as how Trump is taking the money from the elites and giving it back to the people.
I mean, it's talking about Pence, all kinds of stuff. It's like, it's impossible to deny, really.
Yeah.
You have to be a numbskull or a Nimrod.
Yeah, this is why I think that this book is a Mandela effect itself.
You know, you're probably right. This also brings a whole new meaning to diving in the rabbit hole, which we barely scratched.
Aside from all of the people that we mentioned earlier, another rabbit hole Q's post on Project Looking Glass opens up is the so-called time traveler John Titor.
For those who don't know the story, John Titor claimed to be a time traveler from the year 2032 and posted on Art Bell BBS forums around 2001. At the time, many people didn't take him that serious. However, there were things he said that seemed to make sense.
Fakepedia claims a lawyer and a computer whiz created this as a hoax. However, there are many things that John said that people didn't know at the time, along with some very interesting predictions.
He was obsessed with having a copy of our Constitution, and his purpose of coming back to our time was to acquire an IBM 5100 computer, which he needed in the future due to a special feature which was not known at this time.
A few years later, an engineer who helped design it confirmed that such a feature existed.
I mean, that's a proof.
The 5100 had the rare ability to emulate programs in older languages used by the IBM mainframes, but the company was worried about how its competition might use it, so they didn't tell anyone about it.
Another very unusual thing is John expressed his concern about CERN. You're so funny, Ben. He even says that CERN is planning to start some very high energy experiments and that they're creating black holes the size of electrons.
He also stated that 2 micro-singularities were created. Here is a direct quote from him himself.
Quote, the source of power for the C204 that allows it to distort and manipulate gravity comes from 2 microsingularities that were created. The dual event horizons of each one and their mass is manipulated by injecting electrons onto the surface of their respective ergospheres. The electricity comes from batteries. The breakthrough that will allow for this technology will occur within a year or so when CERN brings their larger facility online, unquote. Whoa.
Yeah, and this was like back in like 2000, 2001-ish, you know? So people didn't really talk a lot about singularities, especially. I mean,
yeah.
It's in the Matrix movies and things like that, but not that clear.
No, dude.
Pretty interesting.
Totally.
But what is weird is that from all the research we have done and everyone talking about time travel, the main theme in all of this is that once you change or distort the gravitational field, time seems to fluctuate within that field.
So according to Bill Wood, Dr. Dan Burisch, and many other insiders, along with many Buddhist and Taoist understandings, including our own understandings, time is not linear, and in each dimension, the concept is different.
For example, using our reality and dimension as a base, in a higher dimension, time would seem very slow. In a lower dimension from ours, time would appear very fast. Like 20 years on a lower dimension could only be months in our reality, in our time space.
But in higher dimension, a day or two could mean that 20 years has passed on Earth. And there are many examples of this in history. There are many stories in the East, for example, of monks going to a heavenly paradise for one day, and when they returned to their bodies, they found 6 years had passed on Earth.
Also, if we look at Einstein's theory of relativity, the force of gravity affects time, meaning more gravity, the slower time progresses. Now let's talk about something called the pound replica experiment.
They tested the theory of relativity by showing how photons gain energy when traveling toward a gravitational source. So this experiment proved that clocks should run at different time rates at different places in a gravitational field. That explains it all.
Another test was how scientists took atomic clocks and flew aircraft over the Chesapeake Bay area to further prove the clock in the air ran faster than one on the ground.
Now, taking this idea and looking at space travel, you can prove that time is indeed different, and one could even say each planet would have its own time field since every planet's gravitational force is different. Also,
Using pop culture as a reference, in the movie Interstellar, they showed this very well when a team went to a planet just for a few hours and in different galaxies, and years passed on Earth.
It was like 20, they said, I
Yeah,
think.
it was like, yeah, it really was. Also, even looking at the speed of light, if you travel at the speed of light, when you come back to Earth, 500 years could go by, and you're just like traveling in whatever, you know, it looks like it's just you're moving.
Yeah, isn't that time travel? So after going through all of this, we believe this is how the supernormal ability of precognition and retrocognition works. In a fast time-space, things are already taking place, so using something like the looking glass explains how you could potentially see into the future.
But this is where things get complicated. Our choices or our free will does interfere with the future. So small things could change here and there, and one could try to manipulate the timeline.
But there are higher beings and the divine creator watching over everything. Also, not to mention that there are other dimensions right here now overlapping with each other. We just can't see them or experience them in a normal situation.
But some people do, such as when we see ghosts, spirits, orbs, or other things in other dimensions. So we believe that if someone tries to manipulate the outcome of our future, they wouldn't be able to change the overall final outcome, which seems to be set in stone by God or the divine creator.
Big guy upstairs.
Yes.
Also, as Dan described, our intentions have a lot to do with this. So even if someone sees an outcome in their favor, like becoming president, but they don't have good intentions for all of humankind, now that just won't happen.
We also know that the DeepState created a 16-year plan for the 2008 elections. Obama for 8 years and Hillary Clinton for another 8 years, which in her final 4 would reveal to the world their plan for the New World Order, and people would be so delusional that everyone would believe this was the best outcome for our society.
And yeah, this shows right away that the balance has shifted in our favor, and the most important thing is to wake people up and have them see the truth about our world and universe.
There's so much we didn't cover and so many things we could go deeper into, such as how Project Looking Glass was used on Laura Eisenhower, great-granddaughter of President Eisenhower, and so much more on the chronovision, which Andrew Passagio talks about.
But hey, we're gonna have Andrew Passagio on our show to talk about this entire experience and tell his full story soon, and we're totally psyched. We wanted to include it here, but it was just way too much, and we've been wanting to have him on since day one anyway.
Yep. Also, we'll have Laura tell her side of the story and how the Cabal used Project Looking Glass against her. Plus, we'll have a whole episode with David Wilcock talking about Project Looking Glass and time travel, so stay tuned for that, you guys.
Well, so long, and
Thanks for all the fish!
wait, did you just Hitchhiker Guide from the Galaxy me, or
sure did.
was that like a Egyptian fish reference? Yeah, hope not.
Hitchhiker's Guys.
Good.
Don't panic. Don't panic.
Yeah, we'll see you out on the edge. Other insiders, along with many Buddhist and Taoist understandings, did you just call them toast sits? We could create some Taoist toast, I assume. It has nothing on it. It's an empty...
It's an empty plate.
Yeah.
Toast.
The toaster pops up and no toast comes out. Emptiness.
Yeah.